everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to get into medical school. I want to focus on the medical school application, and I want to share some specific advice I have on how I think you can prepare yourself for this very important application. I am a plastic surgeon. I graduated from the University of Vermont College of Medicine a few years ago now, and I ended up landing a great residency spot after medical school graduation in plastic surgery at Rutgers, and then I went on to do an aesthetic fellowship at Harvard. So I've gone through this application process a few times now, and there are some really valuable tips that I've picked up along the way, and I really want to share these tips with you guys because I think they are things that are really going to help you out as a future applicant. I'm going to share with you the scores and the credentials that I think you should aim for. I'm going to share with you some important advice that I have for things that you can do really early on in this process. From the first day of college, there are things that you can be working on that will boost your future application. And these are things that you really want to start working on along the way. It is very difficult to put the whole package together all at once when you're submitting your medical school application. It's really helpful if you can, along the way, start to do these little things that are really going to make a difference in your application in the future. I also want to share with you guys my tips on the interview process. Guys, I have gone through 1,000 interviews in my time, and I have some really amazing advice on how to have a great interview. So stay tuned toward the end of the video. I'm going to share my tips and tricks on how to have a great interview. Okay, so step number one, you have to complete your pre-medical requirements. This usually involves 1 year of biology with a lab, 1 year of general chemistry with a lab, 1 year of organic chemistry with a lab, 1 semester or half year of biochemistry, 1 year of physics with a lab, and 1 year of English. There's also a math requirement that's going to vary by medical school, but most medical schools require a year of mathematics and recommend calculus and statistics to fulfill that requirement. You are also going to need to choose a major. Try to choose a major that is compatible with these pre-medical school requirements. For example, a math or science major is going to make it easier for you to fulfill your pre-medical requirements and your major requirements in the 4 years that you have in college. So choosing an English major or a history major is just going to make your life really challenging. There's not going to be any crossover between your major classes and your pre-medical classes, and you just aren't going to be able to hit 2 birds with 1 stone with any of those classes. So with all the classes that you're going to have to take, you're going to want to hit 2 birds with 1 stone a couple of times. This will also allow you to have a little bit more room for electives and will give you a little bit more time to focus on studying for those pre-medical classes in order to get those important grades under your belt. I actually chose math as my major, which I really highly recommend. The reason for this is the type of thinking involved in math is very similar to the type of thinking that's involved in problem solving for chemistry and physics. And being forced to practice a similar type of problem solving outside of my pre-med classes made it a lot easier for me to study and to be successful in my pre-medical school classes and my exams. And I know that there isn't a lot of crossover with this major, and I know that's something that I just recommended, but I actually found that it was a little easier for me to do the math major because I didn't have to do so many labs. For example, some of my friends who were in chemistry or biology majors, they had a lot of extra lab courses required to fulfill their major, whereas my math courses really didn't have any of those requirements. There are also a lot of elective courses you can take within mathematics that are actually kind of fun, like computer programming or just basic statistics classes, but I really appreciated not having to do all of that extra lab work that my peers had to do, because that is really time consuming, and I already had to do so many labs as part of the pre-med classes. I just think it made my life a lot easier. So if you think you might have a math brain, it's really something that you should consider. Number 2, try to maintain a GPA around 3.7 or higher throughout college. This is close to the average GPA for students who are accepted to medical school. You want your science class GPA to be a little higher than your non-science class GPA if possible, but you should check out the Princeton review, and I will link that below. They will have the most up-to-date recommendations on what the average GPA is for medical students who are entering their first year. It's worth mentioning that your GPA is only one piece of the picture that makes your application what it is. So don't kill yourself. I mean, if you're really struggling to maintain a GPA of 3.7 or higher, this is only going to be one piece of your application. Number 3, take the MCAT. There are 4 sections, each which is scored between 118 and 132 with an average around 125 for each section. So the total scores range from 472 to 528 with an average around 500. So you should aim for around a 500 on this exam because you want to be close to or above the average for all of the students who are applying to medical school. The timing with this exam is really important. So if you plan to start medical school right after graduation from college, you need to take this exam no later than mid-May of your junior year. And here's why. You need to get that score back by June of your junior year in order to submit your final primary application to medical school. If you don't have your score back by June, this is going to delay your primary application. And if your primary application gets delayed, you might miss out on some interviews because schools are offering these interviews on a rolling basis. And if you don't have your primary application in, you might miss out on some of those first interviews. So it's really to your advantage to get your application finalized as soon as possible. You should ideally also finish your pre-medical requirements before studying for this exam. So if you're finishing your pre-med requirements in your senior year, you're not going to have as much time to study for the exam after you finish all the course material. And it's really a difficult thing to do to try to study for the exam while you're still learning the basic material. Okay, so let's say you decided late. You just don't have enough time to take all of the requirements involved and study for the MCAT before you graduate. That's okay. You can take a gap year after college. You can give yourself some real devoted study time if you so choose. So I actually found myself in that boat. I decided somewhere around my sophomore year that I wanted to go the pre-med route, and I just didn't have enough time to take all the classes and study for the exams before I graduated. I was still taking my last semester of physics in my senior year, and I just didn't have enough time. So I took a gap year, I gave myself some extra time to study, and I didn't worry too much about it. I chose to do a fellowship through my college that involved tutoring some current pre-med students, holding some study sessions, and helping those students to be successful. In retrospect, I kind of wish I had chosen a research year instead of that fellowship. Research really wasn't on my radar at that point in my life, but in addition to the study time, a research year would have given me something really valuable to add to my CV for both my med school application and my residency application in the future. So if you're considering a gap year, please look into the research opportunities that might be around you because this could really help you out in the future, and it may not be something that you're just thinking about at this point. Okay, my 4th word of advice is plan your letters of recommendation as early as possible. If you think you might want to go to medical school, you should start thinking about building relationships from day one with any professor who you think you're going to have a semi-long-term relationship with in college. You are going to need about 3 letters of recommendation to complete your application. Usually 2 of these letters should be from science professors and 1 letter can be from a non-science professor, but you want all of your letters to be really strong. So you should think about building these really strong relationships as early as possible so that when it comes time to ask your letter writer for a letter, you feel comfortable asking them and you feel confident that they're going to be able to write you a strong letter. You should choose one of your professors to be a pre-med advisor, hopefully someone that can serve as a good mentor to you. And when it comes time to ask for your letters, make sure you ask for them well in advance. Give your letter writers a lot of time to write those letters for you. You should definitely give them your CV and any other information that they may find helpful in writing that letter for you. Okay, number 5, extracurriculars. This is hugely important, guys. You need extracurriculars in order to complete your application. Medical schools want to see that you did something other than study. They don't just want you to be a bookworm. This is really going to help you differentiate yourself from the other applicants. And here is my big tip, guys. I think that healthcare related extracurriculars are really going to help boost your application. Yes, you want to seem well-rounded. Yes, if you are a super athlete or an awesome musician, you should definitely put that on your application. But an application with some nice, balanced, extra healthcare related activities is going to stand out to the medical schools. So for example, you could check out doing some volunteer work that is healthcare related. Check out your local community hospital or some of the local clinics and just see if you can go do an observership and offer to help out where you can. You should join some academic societies, some pre-med clubs. If there's a club that you think you might be interested in and it doesn't exist, start it. That will look really good on your application. The other thing you should consider doing is trying to get involved in some research, guys. This is really important and it's only going to help you along the way in your career forever. Research is definitely not required at this phase. It's still really early on in your career, but if you have research before medical school, that is going to make you look like a great applicant. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. Honestly, just getting your name on anything before medical school is going to make you look like a star. It can be a tiny project in a journal that no one's ever heard of. It doesn't even have to be published. It can just be something that you're working on, and you can just talk about this at your interview. You can put it on your application as in process, and it will give you something extra and something interesting to talk about, and it will differentiate you from the other students. Okay, so when it comes time to submit your application, make sure you do it as fast as you possibly can. Get everything prepared ahead of time and make sure your application is going to be finalized as soon as you are able to submit it. I know I already went over this a little bit, but it is so important because you don't want to miss out on any interviews that are offered on a rolling basis. So the application is going to become available in May, the year before you graduate, and you will have about a month to work on it before you're able to submit it for the first time. Try to get everything prepared so that as soon as that day one hits that you're able to submit that application, you can click that button and send off the application immediately. So when you submit that primary application through AMCAS, your application is going to be sent off to all the schools you chose to apply to. And then you'll start receiving some secondary applications in the mail. And you should get those secondary applications out as soon as possible as well. Ideally within a week or two of when you get them. I know that sounds really fast, and there are going to be essays involved in these and things that are going to take you time. And you want to do a really good job on these secondary applications, but you also want to get them out as soon as possible, because the sooner you get that out, the sooner your secondary application is going to be finalized and you have a chance at getting one of those first interview spots. Chances are, guys, if you've gotten to the point where you receive a secondary application, the school is interested in you. You've passed the first test. Your scores and your credentials are likely up to par because that school thought you were worth it to send a secondary application to. And then after the schools receive your secondary application, you're going to start receiving some interview offers. These usually happen in the fall and winter, sometimes in the early spring at some schools. And these are going to be all different. They may be on campus or off campus, they may be Zoom, they may be conducted by somebody in the admissions committee or by a physician who's currently in practice and may be affiliated with that institution. And you want to make a great impression on the person interviewing you because they are going to complete an evaluation on you based on that interview. And that is going to become part of your overall application for that school. I'm going to be honest with you guys, no one likes to write a bad recommendation, so they probably aren't going to write you a bad recommendation, but they might write you a less than glowing one. And the medical school admissions committees, they have to look through a lot of applications and they have to read a lot of these interview evaluations. And they can tell the difference between a great recommendation and an okay one. So you want all your recommendations to be great. And make sure after your interview that you send a thank you note to the interviewer for their time and try to write something specific in the note about what you really liked about that school. Okay, so here's my big word of advice when it comes to the interview process. The first time I ever had an interview for something, which was probably before college, I was terrible. I walked away from interviews feeling like they didn't go well, and it was something that I knew I had to improve on. I also learned how valuable an interview can be. This is the one thing that can push you over the finish line and get you a spot in that entering class. By the time you make it to the interview phase, you've already passed all of the other requirements that school has. So they just want to figure out what makes you unique and why they should accept you over someone else. The first piece of advice I have for you guys is practice, practice, practice. This is the most important thing you should do. I always found that the interviews I had that were later in the season went so much more smoothly because I had already had so much practice from the earlier interviews. And I basically felt like I had this memorized script, and it was just a matter of finding a way to incorporate my script into a new question that I may not have been asked before. So practice in front of a mirror, practice with a parent, practice with a friend, try to guess what questions you're going to be asked, come up with a list of questions, or you can Google a list of common medical school interview questions, and there are going to be some really common, predictable questions, like, for example, why do you want to go to medical school? Make sure you obviously have a really good answer to those questions, and also prepare some answers to some more difficult questions, like what are your weaknesses? Tell yourself that it doesn't matter that much. I used to do this because it really helped me. I would almost pretend that the interview is just going to be for fun. Okay, so that's all I have for today. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please hit the like button, and hopefully this will help you feel more prepared to submit your application in the future. And leave me some comments about any other videos you might like to see, and I will answer your comments and do my best to create those videos.